Thank you very much. We've not got too long today, but hopefully by the end of it I'll be able to give you a bit of an oversight and understanding of some of the challenges and opportunities that we have in the Middle East, and then we'll close on some of the real pertinent issues around shelf life and the access into the Middle East. So we'll start by looking at the market situation and a bit of background to Premier Foods business. We'll look at the developing market and some of the ways that Premier Foods is managing to stay ahead of the curve in terms of its development, and we'll finish by the challenges to trade. If we start with the market overview, depending on which country you look at within the Middle East, you'll find the market dominated by either the Brazilian commodity cuts or Indian buffalo meat. The remainder of the market is then made up by New Zealand, Australia, and the US. Now, export approvals are something that come and go freely within the region. Brazil was out of the region for 2 years between 2014 and 2016, and the US has only just returned this year after a lengthy absence. Now, why am I mentioning this? They're out of the market for a variety of reasons, but it all boils down ultimately to traceability. And a lot of the levy paying issues and discussions that I imagine that you guys have in terms of producers questioning why you have to jump through certain hoops is paying dividend for you in markets such as the Middle East. Australia's never been banned, and that is a very, very strong selling point for your processors who are pitching meat into the region, because from my side of things, when we are dealing with customers who are demanding that continuity and security of supply for their restaurants and for their outlets, they want to be guaranteed that if they start a supply relationship, it's not going to be closed after 6 months or 1 year, and they're then going to have to find a new supply partner. If we look more broadly at the market, what we see is a trend, an underlying trend on chilled product that's growing. There's two sides to that coin. The first side is the manufacturing side of the industry, who are moving towards chilled really purely because of the saving on duty. There's a 5% saving that they can make by moving from frozen to chilled. The other side of the coin is the increase in those chilled premium cuts, and that's something that we're just going to discuss a little bit further now. Just looking at those market dynamics, you really first have to understand the Middle East and how the Middle East operates. It is not a typical Western market. As a so-called dry state where the consumption of alcohol is prohibited, your typical evening and weekend activities are considerably different. Food forms a core centerpiece to every evening, and that drives a lot of the market, and that's why you will see good growth year in, year out, and it's forecasted to continue to be good growth year in, year out. What happens in the Middle East in terms of dining is you will start and you'll have a meal in the evening, and it will continue late into the night. Food is something that is not just consumed as a matter of course to then go and maximize your available drinking time later in the night. It's consumed there as a centerpiece to all your activities. And because of that, the net spend and the frequency in which people within the Middle East eat out is a lot greater than it is within the rest of the world. There is also an increasing demand for chilled. Now, why are we seeing that demand? That's because of the young population that is driving the Middle East market, the Saudi market specifically. They are now becoming educated abroad, they're traveling abroad, and they're also being influenced by a lot of social media. They are subject to brands outside of their region that they want to consume when they return, and they are demanding that when they come back, and that's how the industry is now responding by giving them what they want, essentially. So if you look at those dynamics, you've almost got double the frequency in some cases of eating out in the Middle East versus here. If you couple that then with the types of cuisines that they're eating, American, European cuisines, you can start to put a picture together as to why things such as premium chilled steaks are starting to be on the rise. Final bit on the dynamics is there's good growth across the board, year in, year out, undoubtedly. What happens though is trends come and go within the region. The latest trend, for example, is something called fast casual. again, it's typical of what happens. Something starts out in the US or Europe, comes to the region, and people want to try. Because food is such a core piece of what they do, they're going out and they're experiencing. Time will tell if this is something that's going to stick around long term, but for now, it's doing very well, and it's pushing that growing trend in premium chilled cuts. So a little bit of background about Premier Foods. Premier Foods was founded in 1998 by two British food service professionals who came together with a prominent Saudi owner and started the business. It specializes in halal value-added products, producing everything from a fully cooked chicken wing through to pepperoni and portion-controlled steaks. We serve the food service market and the 35 leading brands within it. Some of the brands that you might recognize are Domino's Pizza, Subway, Emirates Airlines. What we see within the market is we have to respond very quickly. The key to Premier's success is innovation, and in an ever-diversifying market which we have, where we have these trends coming and going very frequently, we have to continually innovate. And the phrase essentially, innovate or die, is extremely pertinent with what we're doing, because if we're not staying ahead of the curve, we're out of the market. I just want to give you a few examples of what we're doing really to continually innovate, and then build a picture as to how this links back into buying Aussie meat. So when we look at creating the best product, how do we go about it? We have to work backwards from the finished good that we're trying to create, and then identify the raw material that suits it. 2 years ago, when we first came to the region, the procurement policy was something that was based very much on price, all upfront price driven, to the detriment of quality, consistency, and provenance. So we set about to try and change that, to try and build direct relationships, not go through traders, and find suppliers around the world that were ready to meet the challenge that we had in terms of finding the right raw material that was going to save us money and produce a good quality product at the end of it. So we set out, we looked at supplying nations. We buy from Brazil, we buy from New Zealand, we buy from Australia. And Australia was the first to step up to the plate. Some key producers in there that were keen to put in that upfront investment of time, and that really is critical. You've got to invest a lot of time in this region to get things going. So Matt Dorney and JBS stepped up to the plate. They were prepared to put in the time, and we started to identify cutting specifications of primals that we could then match with carcass grades to then receive the best quality raw material to us, for us to then process into those products. So it's a good visual. You'll see on the left the product that we were previously buying. It was a commodity bought navel end brisket, and on the right is the new specification that we're doing. You'll see there consistency in shape, size, form, meat colour, fat colour from the product on the right. And why that's important is that is then translating through into the finished product that we're creating. In this instance, we're making beef bacon. Obviously, pork bacon isn't a thing out in the Middle East, but beef bacon is. So consistency is key. Why is consistency key? In the food service market, even to the detriment of quality, you have to have consistency. Why? Because as a customer, you should be able to go to any outlet A or outlet B of a brand, and you should be able to receive something that is of the same quality. And if you can't do that, people start going and looking for new suppliers. So we are now seeing that not only are we winning new business, but we're actually retaining business a lot better by having these new specifications in place, building these relationships with suppliers that are valuing consistency of supply. And it's working a treat for us. So we continue to do that for all our core items. And then we said, right, where do we go next? We wanted to get into portion control for a number of reasons. We already had the equipment within our existing facility. It wasn't a big stretch for us to go to that. But the main challenge, again, was around identifying the right supply. We've got a lot of contacts with the casual diners, quick service restaurants that we deal with, but they all come with technical specifications from the US and Europe, and they want to know that they're going to get that good, consistent, secure, quality supply. So once we looked at the items that they were trying to receive in terms of portion controlled steaks, again, we went to the market, we scoured, we looked at all the regions and who was going to be best suited for us. Again, it was the Australian market that stepped up to the plate. Again, Matt Dorney and JBS came to the fore, invested that time up front. And the net result is that we now have launched a 2-tier steak range. We've got a core grain-fed, we've got an upper tier Angus, and we're now serving multiple casual diners and looking to grow that volume. Just on the visuals here, you'll see the ongoing development of the steak line, portioning of some of the steaks, and the customary rooftop barbecue in Saudi on one of Matt's frequent visits. So where do we go from here? We want to develop the underlying growth. After doing all that development, we want to grow those volumes. We are buoyed by the underlying trend, the continual growth in the food service industry within the region, and the ever-increasing demand that's coming from the hotel industry, especially in the UAE, but increasingly in Saudi. Believe it or not, there is now a tourist visa to come to Saudi Arabia. They expect to open lots more 4- and 5-star hotels in Riyadh and Jeddah over the forthcoming years, and those high-end hotels are demanding the cuts that I've just been talking about there. We're also going to look for complementary applications for those products that we've been developing. So we've got this steak range, but what else can we do with it? We can look at sous vide. Why sous vide? Because that will reduce the preparation time that an outlet can then use that steak for. So airlines and quick service restaurants who previously could never have taken that time to cook a steak can actually take something that's pre-cooked and use it via a reheating method that still retains essentially the same quality. We'll also start to look at lamb. And lamb is something that we haven't touched on yet. It's been more beef focused, but as the most widely consumed red meat within the region, it's something that we see great growth potential in, and more so within the casual dining outlets because they've never been able to offer it because of the turnaround time within the kitchen. So again, sous vide will likely come to the fore, and we should be able to develop something there. So there's lots of opportunities in high-value food service, and it's really playing to the Australian market's strength. So what challenges have we got to trade? The first one is really from the supply side. Unfortunately, I think there's some badly held perceptions about the region, and that's mostly from the suppliers who are putting meat into that region. There's this belief that the Middle East is a little bit backward, not fully developed in their tastes, that it's only a region in which you can sell commodity cuts and a bit of a dumping ground, and oh well, we don't really need to give it very much good customer service. That simply isn't the case, and unfortunately I've come across so many salesmen who hold that view, and that's where they fall down. Saudi is an ever-developing market. You'll see there its students are as educated, bar a percentage mark, as people in Australia. They are travelling extensively to the US and Europe, and they are bringing those expectations back to the region. And this is changing so quickly that the people that do not react to this will be the people that miss out. The second challenge is from the buy side. So the buying managers that you will deal with within that region. Typically, they're all targeted on upfront price. Now, if we go back to the raw material that I was talking about there, one point that I have missed, the concept of total cost in the region is completely overlooked. So if you look at those navel end briskets that were the commodity bought ones, obviously they were coming at a cheaper price point up front, which was the reason for them being bought in the first place. When we moved to that new specification, yes, I was paying a lot more up front on a price per kilo point, but net, I was paying less. Why? Because of the reduced butchery cost in-house, the increase in yield, and the reduction in customer complaints and returns. You put all that together, and net, the cost of production for that product was lower than buying that commodity-bought product in the first instance. Now, this is a concept that people completely miss out on, not just in the region, but outside of that and wider within the industry. So from the buy side, you've got challenges that people are just looking at upfront price. You've also got this issue where the people that hold most of those positions are typically from cultures where they don't appreciate primal cuts, let alone stake cuts. So there's an education issue there. Now, with resources such as the MLA and some of the Osmeat buying guides, you can very quickly start to build bridges with these people and open their eyes to opportunities which, they never thought were in existence. And the final one, and probably the most important one that's been touched on already today, is the shelf life. So Australia, look, you've got a great product. You've got a market-leading product. A product that you can get 120 days shelf life on as a vac-packed chilled primal. But I can't access that. In the region, we've got one player that can, the UAE. Us as Saudi, we've got 70 days. And why is that an issue? Because the amount of time that it gives me to deal with that product when it arrives with me is far, far too small to have a variety of options in terms of what to do with it. By the time it lands with me, I've got 2 to 3 weeks within which to essentially portion and pack and handle that product. Now, realistically, I've got no options other than freezing that down and offering it to those outlets as a frozen product. Again, with more of a trend towards chilled product being demanded, served straight to these customers, I'm going to miss out because I cannot serve that. The UAE will have an unfair competitive advantage, and ultimately, Australia will lose out because the market's going to shrink, and the market opportunity for sales will drop because it'll only be those processors in the UAE that can offer that. So we really, really have to tackle life as probably one of the highest issues within the region at the moment. So, to sum it up, the market's changing rapidly in Saudi. We've got to get rid of those historic perceptions of the region. There's a lot of opportunity now for chilled, premium, high-end cuts within the region. And Australia is perfectly placed with your product and all the hoops that the producers do jump through. You're perfectly placed to capitalize on that. If you can sort out the issues on shelf life, and if people can sort out their perceptions and the approaches to the Middle East, you really will be perfectly placed to capitalize on the opportunities that are there. Thank you.